Ahed Tamimi is facing years in prison for slapping an Israeli soldier. Is she an anti-Semite who slapped the soldier for no apparent reason? Well, Israeli soldiers invaded her property, shot her 15-year-old cousin in the head with a rubber-coated bullet at close range. No, it's not gonna kill you, but it'll leave you handicapped. If someone was illegally occupying your country, terrorizing your family, what would you do? Would you sit at your doorstep and cry? Or would you try to fight back and let your voice be heard? I'm sure there are retarded Faith Goldberg fans who will comment on this video and say that if you're supporting Palestine, you're supporting Muslims. Both Muslims and Christians are being occupied by Israel. More importantly, those are human beings being occupied by Jewish supremacists. Imagine if your home was bulldozed in order to create a Jewish state. In the past, I've shown you so many examples of them referring to us Gentiles as animals. Here's another one courtesy of Israeli lawmaker Oren Hazan. Israeli journalist Ben Caspit called for Ahed Tamimi to be raped. Keep in mind that she is only 16 years old. Caspit wrote in Ma'ariv, "In the case of the girls, we should exact a price at some other opportunity, in the dark, without witnesses and cameras." There's a strong chance that Tamimi will be raped and then threatened to keep quiet. Jewish supremacist Rabbi Eyal Karim publicly said that Jewish law permits raping Gentile women as a way to keep up morale. He was later promoted to IDF chief rabbi. So this is actually normal in Israel. Another example is the Eastern European sex slave rings operating in Israel, which the government turns a blind eye to. This is a very important message to get out. There are some people on the right talking about this, but not enough. Instead, you'll often hear the controlled opposition talk about white Sharia and letting your women be raped. If you doubt the recent revelations, just pause the video and read this. Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman called for revenge on Tamimi's family, saying, "Everyone involved, not only the girl, but also her parents and those around them will not escape from what they deserve." This is the same Jewish supremacist who openly called for disloyal Israeli Arabs to be beheaded. Education Minister Naftali Bennett said that Ahed Tamimi and the other girls standing around her should finish their lives in prison. This is the same Jewish supremacist who said, "I've killed lots of Arabs in my life, and there's no problem with that." Whoever lifts a hand against the state of Israel must die. This is what they believe. The Israeli government actually passed a law sentencing Palestinians to 20 years in prison for throwing stones. And Tamimi is facing 14 years in prison. But when a Jewish settler slapped an Israeli soldier, what happened? She was taken in for questioning and released on bail the same day and allowed to return home. The main difference between them is that Tamimi assaulted a soldier who was sent by a hostile government that does not recognize her existence, steals her land, kills and wounds her relatives. While Al-Kobi, a serial criminal, assaulted a soldier from her own people and her religion who was sent by her nation to protect her, a nation in which she is a citizen with special privileges. The Israeli government doesn't just have different rights for Jews and Gentiles. This is actually preached in their own books. They are pushing for gun control in America, but they aren't pushing for gun control in Israel, which has been illegally occupying Palestine for 50 years. They have the Palestinians disarmed and are openly stealing their private property. These are the people who are trying to take your guns away. Imagine trying to take your country back and you have to throw stones. Palestinian protester Ibrahim Abu Tariah. 10 years ago they took his legs, and now they took his life. Come on. Israel has always been killing protesters with impunity. Ahed Tamimi's cousin Mustafa was killed protesting. Her uncle Rushdie was killed protesting. Just recently, they killed one of her relatives, Musab, who was also protesting. Israel has killed at least a dozen people since Trump recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. But in the West, we don't hear a damn thing. all we hear about is Iran killing protesters. Lawrence Simonson said that anyone who criticizes Israel is a social justice warrior. So apparently if you criticize people who commit terrorism against you, you're a social justice warrior. King David Hotel bombing in 1946. Jewish terrorists murdered 91 people. 28 of those people were British. The leader Menachem Begin went on to become prime minister. In 1967, Israel murdered 34 Americans and wounded another 174 on the USS Liberty. They tell you that they're your greatest ally, then shoot you in the back and block your transmission so you can't call for help. Lauren Simonson is now showing her true neocon colors. She is pushing for another war for Israel. Destabilizing Iraq and Syria for Israel created 13.6 million refugees for us, and that's just in 2014. That doesn't even include Libya.
Именно после свержения Каддафи, при активном участии отдельных европейских стран, поток беженцев стал абсолютно бесконтрольным.
Слушайте, люди из НАТО, вы бомбите стену, которая не пропускала поток миграции в Европу. Стену, которая останавливала террористов Аль-Каиды. Этой стеной была Ливия. Вы разрушаете ее. Вы идиоты.
Do you want to act like idiots again and see what happens? If Iran and Lebanon are destabilized, where do you think all those people are going to go? They're not going to Israel, who is next door. They're going to Europe. So this is completely self-destructive. The Israelis need to stop being cowards, fight their own wars, and stop shooting us in the back. But they don't want to stop. It's up to us to change things. Lorde listened to her fans and canceled her concert in Tel Aviv. Rabbi Shmuley Botich used a full-page ad in the Washington Post to call her a bigot. Howard Stern called Lorde anti-Semitic for canceling her concert in Tel Aviv. The Israeli government publicly says that even gay Jews have higher souls than Gentiles. But if you decide to boycott Jewish supremacists, apparently you are the bigot, you are the racist. These people are completely insane. Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu declared war on New Zealand after they voted to condemn Israel for stealing land. If you don't know who Lorde is, that was her great music I used for my animal documentary. Monika Schaefer was arrested in Germany for Holocaust denial. She's a Canadian citizen, she made the video in Canada, but they are still detaining her. Her brother Alfred is a brave content creator, and we've been following each other's channels since the start. The Jewish supremacists at Rebel Media tried to defame Monika, but I guess that wasn't enough. British historian David Irving was sentenced to 3 years in prison for Holocaust denial. He's a revisionist historian. It's his job to investigate history, and he was imprisoned for doing so. He was 68 years old when he was sentenced in Austria. Germar Rudolph, a German chemist, concluded that it was scientifically impossible to kill people with Zyklon B at the gas chambers they had in Auschwitz. He was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison for doing his job. He's a chemist who actually went to Auschwitz and performed tests. German lawyer Sylvia Stahls was sent to prison twice for Holocaust denial. In 2008, she served 3 years and 3 months, got out, then a year later at 51 years of age, they sentenced her to 20 months in prison for saying that the official narrative of the Holocaust was never proven. Rest in peace, Ernst Zundel. He is a hero who sacrificed his freedom to speak the truth. At the age of 68, Germany sentenced him to 5 years in prison for Holocaust denial. He was detained for 2 years in Canada and actually did 7 years in total. Ursula Haberbeck, an 88-year-old German grandmother, was sentenced to 6 months in prison for Holocaust denial. 88 fucking years old. Horst Mahler, German lawyer was sentenced to 10 years in prison for Holocaust denial. 10 fucking years. And he's 81 years old. There's actually more people who are imprisoned, but you get the point. Whether you agree with Holocaust denial or not, human beings are being imprisoned for their opinions. This is something that the most popular free speech advocates and alternative media will not talk about. They also won't talk about the Israel Anti-Boycott Act, being fined and imprisoned for boycotting a foreign government. What's even worse is the hypocrisy. The Israeli government denies the Armenian genocide. Why are they not imprisoned? In 2010, Israeli President Shimon Peres visited Ukraine and told them to forget their genocide, forget Holodomor. If someone went to Israel and said forget the Holocaust, they would be shot or put in prison. I respect Ahed Tamimi. Jewish supremacists are taking over her country, terrorizing her people, and at least she's fighting back. Jewish supremacists are taking over our governments. And what are most of us doing about it? Jerking off? We need to be waking up as many people online as we can. It's not that difficult. I've gotten over 1 million views in each of my first 2 years doing this. There are a lot of people that don't know what to do. If you're an American, you need to be protesting AIPAC, the Israeli lobby that is controlling your politicians. If you're not able to protest, keep talking about how Israel is using you like a whore in the Middle East.
But Israel, through its lobby, has manifested so much power over the United States Congress that we're embroiled in wars that I don't believe we should be. Our kids are coming back in body bags. And in the long run, this Israeli lobby is going to hurt Israel. So as soon as you mention Israel, someone claims you're an anti-Semite. The truth of the matter is, I'm pro-American, Sean, and I don't like, hear me. Hear me.
Listening.
I don't like what's happening in America today.
All right, that's fair.
Our kids are coming back in body bags.
Wait a minute, but you're saying
we're bankrupt, completely broke.
But you're suggesting here that we're fighting wars on behalf of Israel. But you just mentioned the 9/11 attacks.
I think a lot of that has been influenced
Hear me
by
now,
Israel.
Congressman.
Also, do not stop talking about the USS Liberty. If you don't want to protest, then print out posters and put them up anywhere. People are even writing about the USS Liberty on their cars. People are even putting billboards up. Based Jewish supremacist Pamela Geller of Breitbart News called Lamar advertising anti-Semitic for featuring the USS Liberty. That is like calling someone Islamophobic for criticizing ISIS. Breitbart is not pro-American. They call you a racist for talking about when Israel committed terrorism against you. Really Graceful, who easily gets hundreds of thousands of views, did a video on the USS Liberty and YouTube limited it to 20,000 views. In order to be elected, every American president has to undertake to satisfy Zionist demands. His hands are tied. When he draws up his manifesto, the candidate for the White House takes the aspirations and the interests of the ordinary Americans less into account than those of the Zionists. The winner will be the one who has done the most to flatter the Zionists, to the extent of neglecting the interests of America and Americans. It is no accident that Zionism has infiltrated the whole of the United States. It intends to use this great power for its own ends in the Middle East. But it is possible that one day America will wake up, rebel, and save the country before its final collapse. Even Muammar Gaddafi believed you could take back your country. You just need to believe in yourselves. He had no reason to like America, but he knew that this is something that has to be done. The United States is the main weapon of Jewish supremacists. You are the golem. The golem has to turn on its master. For God's sake, in Yiddish, it's goylem. Let's put our differences aside and focus on what has to be done. It's not just Palestine. We're all occupied by Israel.
لأنه إحنا مش بس بنقاوم من طريق إنه ننزل مواجهات هيك، لا بنقاوم عن طريق الإعلام. بالنهاية الإشي إنساني، الكل يعني كلنا ضحية احتلال. نترك كفلسطينيين مش راح نترك أي حدا مظلوم يتعذب بحاله. بس لا، بحكي لهم إنه يستمروا بمقاومتهم، يأثر عليهم، لأنه الحق لازم يطلع صوته.